250 guests froze in shock as my mother's hand cracked across my face, so loud the violinist stopped playing mid-note. My diamond earring flew across the marble floor, catching the chandelier's light as if mocking me. In that moment, I realized my family wasn't just humiliating me in private anymore. They were destroying me in public. What none of them knew was that every second of this disaster was being live-streamed, and it would change the fate of my family forever. If you've ever felt dismissed, betrayed, or made to feel invisible, or maybe you've experienced the deepest loneliness, or that unbearable pain of losing those you love most, share it. Leave a comment. Tell me where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe, because maybe the next story will remind you of your own strength. 250 guests froze in shock as the sound ripped through the ballroom like a gunshot. My mother's hand had connected with my face so hard that my head snapped sideways. The violinist stopped, playing mid-note. My champagne glass tilted, nearly slipping from my hand. And then came the silence. Thick, humiliating, absolute silence. The Skyline Plaza's grand ballroom was supposed to be shimmering with joy that night. Golden chandeliers glinting, roses blooming in tall glass vases, laughter and clinking glasses, filling the air. Instead, the spotlight was on me, and not because I wanted it. My cheek throbbed, burning red under layers of makeup. My diamond earring, one I'd bought myself after closing a $200 million deal, skittered across the marble floor, catching the light like a cruel spark. For a moment, I couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. I was Alexandra Carter, 35 years old, vice president of marketing at one of the fastest-growing tech companies in San Francisco. In boardrooms, my voice carried weight. My strategies made headlines. But in this ballroom, in front of my family, I was still just the daughter they dismissed, the sister they resented, the woman too independent to ever be enough. I heard the whispers before I saw the stares. Did she just slap her? In front of everyone? At her own daughter's wedding? 250 sets of eyes bore into me. Pity in some, judgment in most. Phones raised, flashes flickered. Someone was still recording. Someone was live streaming. My humiliation was no longer private. It was public property. I swallowed hard, tasting metal at the back of my throat. Part of me wanted to scream, to throw the champagne flute across the room, to demand they all see me for who I really was. But another part of me, the part honed by years of holding my ground in ruthless boardrooms, told me to stay calm, to breathe, to stand. Because in that single blistering moment, something inside me crystallized. If I surrendered now, if I bowed my head and gave them what they wanted, I would lose more than a penthouse or my pride. I would lose myself. The ballroom held its breath, waiting for me to break. But what no one realized, not my mother with her hand still raised, not my father watching with narrowed eyes, not even Lily glowing in her wedding gown, was that they had just lit a fuse. A fuse that would explode far beyond this ballroom, into boardrooms, contracts, headlines, and the very empire my father had built. But before I show you how that explosion tore through everything my family thought they controlled, let me take you back to the morning, when I still believed I was just attending my sister's perfect wedding. That morning, sunlight spilled across Chicago like honey, catching the mirrored windows of the Grand View Hotel where Lily's wedding would unfold. From the outside, everything looked perfect. Rows of white roses, gold-trimmed linens, champagne, flutes polished to a gleam. If you'd walked into the ballroom at 8 a.m., you would have thought you were stepping into a dream. I thought so too for a moment. I told myself, maybe today won't be another battlefield. Maybe, just for Lily's sake, they'll let me exist in peace. But my mother's voice was the first sound I heard when I stepped inside. Alexandra. The way she said my name felt like a reprimand, not a greeting. Her eyes scanned me like a scanner set to disapprove. She landed on my ivory silk jumpsuit, the one I'd chosen because it made me feel strong, elegant, unapologetic. "That," she said, her lips curling. "You look like you're heading to a corporate board meeting, not your sister's wedding." Heat rushed up my neck. I smoothed the fabric with deliberate care, willing myself not to react. "Good morning to you too, Mom." She didn't answer. She was already turning toward Lily, who floated into the room in her gown, radiant as if she'd been born for the spotlight. My father's booming voice followed. "Family comes first, Alexandra. You'll understand that when you finally settle down, if you ever do." The jab slid under my skin like a blade. I forced my face into neutrality. 35. Single. No ring. To them, those facts erased everything else about me. Every sleepless night spent building campaigns. Every negotiation I'd won against men twice my age. Every milestone I'd fought to carve for myself. Relatives swarmed like bees, but their buzz was poison. "Still no husband?" one aunt whispered behind her hand. "She spends too much time in boardrooms," another smirked. My cousin Derek, never missing an opportunity, called across the room. "Maybe if you spent less time in skyscrapers and more time in bedrooms, you wouldn't be here alone." Laughter rippled, casual, cruel. I clenched my jaw so tightly it ached. What they didn't know, what they never believed, was that I wasn't just in skyscrapers. I owned a piece of one. A penthouse on the 45th floor overlooking Lake Michigan, bought in cash after closing a $200 million deal. But if I pulled out proof, if I showed them pictures or bank statements, it would only prove how desperate I was for their approval. So I stayed silent, let them laugh, let their words sting. I stared at the glittering chandeliers, told myself to breathe, told myself it was just one day, but deep down a part of me knew it would never just be one day. And by the time the reception began, that knowledge would crystallize when they used my silence as a weapon against me. The pre-ceremony mingling was supposed to be lighthearted, a swirl of champagne bubbles, polite laughter, camera, flashes. Instead, it felt like standing in the center of a firing squad armed with smiles. Aunt Sally, voice high and chirpy, swooped in first. "So, Alexandra, how's that little apartment of yours in San Francisco?" "Must be cozy." Her tone dripped with faux sweetness, the kind that cut deeper than open insults. "It's a penthouse, actually," I corrected softly, not wanting to ignite flames. The circle around her burst into laughter, clutching pearls as if I'd told the most outrageous joke. "A penthouse? Oh, Alexandra. You and your stories." Sally wheezed between giggles. Before I could breathe, Lily glided over, the bride, the star, the darling of the family. Her satin gown shimmered under the chandeliers, her smile as sharp as glass. "Last year she told us she was buying a Tesla," she said, voice sweet but loud enough to carry. "Can you imagine?" The crowd chuckled again, eyes sparkling with amusement at my expense. I had bought a Tesla. It was parked outside at that very moment. But I bit down on the words, let them die in my throat. Because defending myself would only give them more to sneer at. Mom arrived to join the fun, her voice cutting like ice. Madison's always been ambitious. Too ambitious, really. That's her problem. Their laughter rippled again. Each word another needle. Too ambitious. Too cold. Too masculine. Too much. My phone buzzed in my hand. A notification from my building concierge. A package scheduled for delivery tomorrow at my penthouse. 45th floor. 4 bedrooms. Windows soaring from floor to ceiling with a view of Lake Michigan that stole your breath. A home featured in Architectural Digest. One I'd paid for in cash after a grueling deal that had nearly broken me. I could have pulled up the photos, could have shoved the proof in their faces. But what would it prove? That I still craved their validation? That I needed their applause to make my success real? No. I straightened my shoulders, forced my voice calm. "You're right," I said, to Uncle Tom, who was chuckling about how not everyone could afford luxury. "There's no shame in living within your means." They laughed louder, mistaking my restraint for weakness. Inside, though, my chest burned. Not with shame, but with the realization that they would never see me, not unless I forced them to. And soon, they would force me into the cruelest spotlight of all, by announcing to 250 guests that my home no longer belonged to me. The ceremony itself blurred past me, vows recited, champagne toasts raised, Lily glowing under the chandeliers as if the entire universe revolved around her. I told myself I could survive it. One day. Just get through one day. But the reception was where it all unraveled. The band had just finished playing a lively swing number when my father stood at the head table, spoon clinking against his champagne glass. The chatter faded. The lights seemed to sharpen, and 250 faces turned toward him. My chest tightened with a sense of dread I couldn't name yet. "Family means everything to us," he began, his voice rich, commanding, practiced from decades of addressing shareholders. Guests leaned in, smiling, ready for what they assumed would be a sentimental toast. "And tonight," he continued, glancing at Lily, "we have something very special to give." My stomach dropped, a storm warning inside me. "With Alexandra's blessing," he said, drawing out the words like a knife unsheathed. "We are thrilled to announce that she is giving her Lake Michigan penthouse to Lily and her new husband as a wedding gift." The room erupted. Applause crashed like thunder. Guests stood, clapping, dabbing tears with napkins. Phones shot up, capturing every second. I could hear delighted gasps. "How generous!" "What a sister!" Lily pressed her hands to her chest in mock surprise, eyes glistening with well-rehearsed tears. "Oh my God, Alex!" she cried, voice ringing through the microphone as my father passed it to her. "The penthouse? Are you serious?" All eyes swung to me. 250 pairs of eyes. My boss's wife at table 12. 3 of my most important clients at table 8. Colleagues, neighbors, strangers, all watching. The weight of expectation pressed against my ribs, suffocating me. I sat frozen, champagne glass halfway to my lips, my mind racing. This wasn't a gift. This was a theft wrapped in gold ribbon and applause. They had orchestrated it perfectly. The announcement, the setting, the crowd. In front of so many witnesses, refusing would make me look monstrous. Agreeing would strip me of everything I'd fought for. The room cheered, clapped louder. Some guests even rose to their feet. Lily wiped at her eyes, glowing like a saint. "I can't believe this, Alex. You're the best sister anyone could ever ask for." I forced a breath into my lungs, heart hammering so loud it drowned out the band. My father extended a hand toward me, beckoning. "Come up here, Alexandra. Join us for this special moment." The trap had closed, but what they hadn't accounted for was that, for the first time in my life, I wasn't going to play along. My father's hand stretched toward me, palm open, as if I were a child expected to come obediently when called. The applause roared on, the band paused, and for a second the whole ballroom seemed to pulse with one thought. Alexandra will smile. Alexandra will obey. But my legs moved differently. I rose slowly, my chair scraping against the marble with a screech that cut through the applause. I held my champagne glass steady, though my heart hammered like it wanted to leap out of my chest. "Excuse me," I said, my voice clear, carrying even without the microphone. "I never agreed to this." The ballroom fell silent, stunned. The air snapped tight like a violin string. My father blinked, his smile twitching. "Don't be selfish, Alexandra. Not on your sister's special day." I stepped forward, each heel clicking like a gavel striking judgment. "This is inappropriate," I said evenly. "If you want to discuss property, we can do it privately." "There's nothing to discuss," my mother snapped, snatching the microphone from my father's hand. Her voice boomed through the speakers. "It's a family gift, and family gives without hesitation." My throat tightened, but I refused to look away. "It's my property," I said, my voice rising enough for every guest to hear. "And I haven't agreed to anything." The gasps were immediate. Whispers darted across tables like sparks. How could she? On her sister's wedding day? So ungrateful. Lily's mascaraed eyes shimmered, perfect pearls of moisture catching the chandelier light. "Alex," she whispered into her microphone, just loud enough for the crowd to hear. "I thought you loved me enough to want me happy." Her words struck like an arrow, but my chest burned hotter. "Your happiness doesn't require my home," I replied, every syllable measured, deliberate. Aunt Sally shouted from across the room, "Come on, Alex, it's family." Uncle Tom chimed in. "You don't even have a family to fill it. What do you need all that space for?" The voices piled on, stone after stone stacking against me. I could feel the wall they were building. Pressure, guilt, shame, closing, in around me. My father raised his microphone again, face flushed. "Alexandra, stop this nonsense. This is your sister's night. You can buy another place. Be reasonable." "Then you buy her one," I shot back before I could stop myself. The gasp was audible, collective, like the ballroom itself had inhaled and forgotten how to breathe. Someone at table 3 actually clutched her pearls. Cameras clicked furiously. The photographer captured every second, as if history was unfolding. And then it happened. My mother's face turned a violent shade of red. She stormed across the dance floor, heels striking like gunshots. Her arm swung. And the sound of her palm against my cheek split the night into before and after. The crack of my mother's palm against my cheek detonated through the ballroom like a gunshot. My head snapped to the side, the sting searing through my skin, heat flooding my face. For a heartbeat, the world tilted, sound collapsed, air thickened, and then everything went utterly still. My diamond earring, the one I'd bought myself after closing the most grueling deal of my career, tore loose. I watched it arc through, the air in slow motion, the chandelier's light scattering across each stone before it pinged against the marble floor and spun out of sight. 250 guests gasped in unison. Then came the silence. Not the comfortable hush of reverence, but the kind that suffocates. The kind that magnifies every heartbeat until it sounds like thunder in your ears. Even the band froze mid-song, bows suspended above strings. A waiter stood paralyzed, tray of champagne flutes trembling in his hands. I didn't raise a hand to my cheek. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. Instead, I stood perfectly still, letting the silence stretch and strangle the room. My mother's hand still hovered in the air, trembling slightly, her knuckles white around the microphone in her other fist. Her ragged breathing hissed over the speakers, amplified for everyone to hear. For 30 eternal seconds, nothing moved. Nothing except me. My heels clicked against the marble, each step deliberate, echoing in the vast, suffocating quiet. I walked across the room to where my earring had landed. The small piece of jewelry glittered against the floor like a fallen crown. I bent down, picked it up carefully, and fastened it back into my ear with steady hands. The ballroom watched, transfixed, as if I were performing a ritual instead of reclaiming a trinket. I straightened, smoothed the front of my ivory jumpsuit, and looked directly at my mother. Her face was a cocktail of rage, disbelief, and something I'd never seen before. Fear. I didn't flinch. My voice was level, almost too calm. "Excuse me." Gasps rippled again. Some guests turned to each other in shock. Others leaned forward as if waiting for me to collapse. But I didn't collapse. I turned away from the head table, picked up my clutch, and began walking toward the exit. Not rushing, not stumbling, just walking, steady and composed, like I had just closed another deal. Behind me, the ballroom erupted into chaos. Chairs scraping, voices rising, Lily crying into her microphone, my father shouting my name. But I didn't stop. Because in that silence, in that moment of humiliation, something inside me had hardened. They thought the slap would break me. Instead, it became the spark that would burn down everything they thought they controlled. And what they didn't know was that I had already prepared for this day, and I had an ally powerful enough to bring their empire crashing down. The elevator doors slid shut behind me, muting the chaos of the ballroom above. My cheek still burned where my mother's hand had struck, the sting radiating like a brand. I pressed my back against the mirrored wall, staring at my reflection. My face looked calm, too calm, but my eyes betrayed me. They flickered with something raw, something breaking free. The vibration in my clutch jolted me back. My phone, 3 missed calls, a text. I unlocked the screen with trembling fingers. The name glowing across the display made my breath catch. David Monroe, mentor, CEO of Monroe Tech, silent partner in my father's construction company. The man whose decisions could make or break empires. And the only person outside this family who knew the truth about me. His message was short, just 3 words. Say the word. I read it once, twice. My throat tightened. He knew. Somehow he'd seen what was happening upstairs. The live stream. Of course. Lily's in-laws had been recording, the whole night, broadcasting my humiliation to God knows how many people. My pulse hammered. For years I had fought to keep the world separate. My corporate life and my family shame. To them, I was always the difficult daughter, the career-obsessed woman too cold to love. To David, I was his vice president, the strategist who had shepherded a $200 million deal across the finish line. But now the two worlds had collided under chandelier light and a mother's raised hand. I slid down the elevator wall, the cool mirror pressing into my back. Say the word. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. My mind churned. If I let him step in, everything would change. The illusion of family harmony would shatter forever. My father's company would be exposed. My mother's cruelty immortalized online. There would be no going back. But hadn't that slap already erased going back? I thought of my earring glinting on the marble floor, of the applause that demanded I surrender, of Lily's fake tears and the guests' condemning whispers. And I thought of the penthouse I had built with my own blood and sleepless nights, a sanctuary no one had given me and no one had the right to take. My hand steadied. My choice crystallized. I typed 2 words. Green light. The elevator dinged. The doors opened to the quiet lobby. I stepped out, phone still in my hand, my pulse steady now. Upstairs, my family thought they had won. They thought they had cornered me into silence. What they didn't know was that I had just unleashed a storm far greater than anything they could control. And within the hour, David Monroe himself would walk into that ballroom, with the power to turn my parents' empire to dust. The ballroom doors burst open with a heavy clang, the kind that makes even the drunkest guests snap to attention. A shaft of cool white light spilled in from the corridor, cutting across the sea of sequined gowns and tuxedos. And then, he appeared. David Monroe. 6'3", Armani suit tailored like steel armor. His presence sucked the oxygen out of the room. On either side of him walked 2 attorneys, their leather briefcases snapping shut in unison like weapons being cocked. Whispers tore through the crowd. Is that Monroe Tech's CEO? What's he doing here? Wait, isn't he the one... My father's face drained of color. the microphone trembling in his hand. My mother stiffened, clutching Lily's arm as though the bride could shield her. Lily blinked, confused, her tears drying mid-performance. David didn't rush. His strides were deliberate, measured, the sound of his shoes echoing louder than the band had played all night. When he reached the head table, he stopped. He looked directly at my father, then at me. "Good evening," he said, voice smooth but lethal. It carried effortlessly, without need for a microphone. I was hoping this night would be a celebration. Instead, I had the misfortune of watching something disgraceful, broadcast live for the world to see. The ballroom went silent. Guests froze, champagne flutes hovering midair. Even the waiters had stopped moving, their trays balanced like statues. David reached into his briefcase and pulled out a stack of documents, laying them flat on the white linen of the head table. The sound was sharp, final. Alexandra Carter is not just Richard's daughter. She is the vice president of marketing at Monroe Tech, architect of our Asia-Pacific expansion, and the strategist behind our upcoming IPO. Without her, the deal that made this company billions would have never existed. Gasps exploded around the room. My boss's wife at table 12 dropped her fork. A client at table 8 muttered, "She's that Carter?" David's gaze hardened. Tonight I witnessed an attempted coercion, a public ambush meant to strip Alexandra of her property. Property earned through her own work, not gifted by family money. This behavior is unacceptable. And as someone who owns 35% of your company, Richard, I am alarmed. Father's jaw twitched. This is a family matter. David leaned forward, his shadow stretching across the head table. The moment you made it public, Richard, it became my matter. And the board's. My mother's lips parted, searching for words, but nothing came. Lily stared at me, wide-eyed, as though she was seeing me for the first time, and for once, I didn't feel invisible. Because David wasn't done, he was about to reveal the clause that would put my family's empire on the chopping block. The papers lay on the white linen like a death sentence waiting to be signed. David tapped one page with his index finger, calm, precise, the way a surgeon points to an organ before cutting it out. "Richard," he said, his voice carrying easily through the stunned silence. "When you signed our shareholder agreement 5 years ago, you agreed to a clause regarding moral turpitude and conduct unbecoming of leadership. Do you recall page 47? My father's Adam's apple bobbed. This is outrageous. You can't use that." "Oh, I can," David interrupted smoothly, his gaze never wavering. "Because tonight, in front of 250 guests, on a live stream watched by tens of thousands, I witnessed you and your wife attempt to publicly coerce your daughter into surrendering a corporate asset. Then your wife assaulted her, on camera, with audio. A ripple tore through the crowd, gasps, murmurs, the sharp intake of collective breath. Guests craned their necks, eyes darting to the phones in their hands. Twitter notifications lit up, screens, hashtags scrolled like wildfire. Chuck, stand with Alex. Wedding slap. Carter collapse. David's attorney slid a copy of the agreement across the table toward my father. Clause 19.2, she said crisply. Moral turpitude, any action that brings disrepute upon the company or its shareholders. Tonight, Richard, you gave us exactly that. My mother surged forward, snatching the microphone. This is family business. How dare you parade our private matters? Private? David's eyes cut to her like blades. He pointed toward the far table where Lily's brother-in-law sheepishly lowered his phone. Your son-in-law's family live-streamed the entire ordeal. There is nothing private about it anymore. You wanted an audience? Congratulations. Now you have one. The ballroom buzzed like a hive struck with a stick. Some guests whispered support for Lily, Others shook their heads in disgust. One woman muttered loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear, "I don't do business with people who hit their children." My father's face turned ashen. "You can't destroy me over this." David's reply was cold, surgical. "I don't need to destroy you. You've done that yourself. What I can do is call an emergency board meeting within 24 hours. And given that I control 35% and the Jensen Trust controls another 15%, I'd say your days of leading Carter construction are numbered." The room gasped again, louder this time. My father staggered back into his chair, suddenly looking decades older. My mother's hand shook around the microphone, her mask of control shattering. I stood at the edge of the chaos, my pulse steady. For once, I wasn't the silent shadow in the corner. I was the storm they had underestimated. And the storm was just beginning, because outside that ballroom, the internet had already chosen its side. By dawn, the clip had already spread beyond Chicago. The slap, the gasp, the silence, my refusal, David Monroe's entrance. It was everywhere. Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, even the morning news. Reporters replayed the footage in slow motion, narrating my humiliation as if it were a courtroom drama. The hashtags trended for hours. Stand with Alex, wedding slap, Carter collapse, millions of views, thousands of comments, and the verdict was nearly unanimous. The internet had chosen its side, and it wasn't my parents'. By mid-morning, the dominoes began to fall. Jim Patterson of Patterson Industries sent an email. "Richard, I'm terminating our $4 million contract effective immediately. We don't work with companies whose executives assault their children on live streams." Sarah Williams of Williams Logistics. "This behavior is unacceptable. Our partnership ends today." David Kim of Kim. Electronics. "Family violence is not a private matter when it affects corporate trust. Consider our deal void." Millions evaporated in hours. My father's empire, the one he'd built over decades, was collapsing in less time than it took for my mother's slap to echo through a ballroom. At noon, the local paper ran the headline, "Carter wedding erupts. Daughter publicly refuses to surrender $3.5 million penthouse." The photo was brutal. Me standing tall with the microphone, my mother mid-swing, my earring frozen in the air like a comet. Inside my penthouse, I scrolled through the coverage, ice pressed to my cheek, coffee cooling in my hand. My sanctuary had never felt more earned. Yet watching the chaos unravel, I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. Messages poured in from strangers. "Thank you for standing up. I see you. Your boundaries matter. Thousands of them." My phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Somewhere in that flood, I found pieces of myself I hadn't realized I'd lost. Validation from people who had no reason to lie. Meanwhile, Lily's fairy tale wedding unraveled in real time. Her in-laws announced they were postponing the honeymoon until they understood the kind of family they had married into. Photos of her tear-streaked face hit tabloids by afternoon, but the sympathy she craved wasn't there. Comment sections called her entitled, complicit, spoiled. My mother raged online, posting a rant about ungrateful daughters corrupted by corporate greed. Screenshots spread like wildfire, captioned, "And now we know where the problem started." And my father didn't rage. He wilted. Colleagues described him as distracted, pale, frantic. By evening, he had lost 6 contracts, worth tens of millions. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the one holding the room. Set my coffee down and pressed my palms to the glass of my penthouse window, staring out over Lake Michigan. The city glittered, alive and oblivious. They had thought they could strip me bare. Instead, they had stripped themselves. But the fallout wasn't done, because for me, the storm was transforming into something else. Power. 3 days after the wedding, my cheek had healed, but the bruise inside me still throbbed. I woke up in my penthouse to sunlight spilling over Lake Michigan, golden and relentless. For the first time in years, I felt the light wasn't mocking me. It was inviting me. My phone buzzed. David Monroe. Again. 6 contracts gone, he said when I answered. His voice was calm, surgical. Your father's expansion project is dead in the water. Do you want me to stop pressing? I turned from the window, my reflection pale but steady in the glass. No, I said, my voice firm. Not for revenge, for justice. Because this wasn't about destroying them anymore. It was about reclaiming the years I'd spent invisible. Later that day, I was summoned to David's office. He didn't waste time with pleasantries. The board's impressed, he said, sliding a document across his desk. The way you handled the situation, the restraint, the clarity, the refusal to crumble under pressure, it's exactly the kind of leadership we need. I scanned the paper. Senior Vice President of Global Strategy, promotion, 40%, increase in stock options. Enough to buy another penthouse if I wanted, but I didn't. The one I had was enough. It was mine. Congratulations, David said. His eyes softened. I've seen executives collapse under less. But you turned humiliation into leverage. As I signed, a thought crystallized. Family doesn't always mean the people who share your blood. Family is the circle of people who believe in you, who lift you when others tear you down. And right there in that office, I realized I had found family in a boardroom, not a dining room. That evening, my team surprised me with a small gathering in the office lounge. Nothing extravagant, just champagne, cake, and their genuine smiles. To Alex, one colleague toasted, the woman who proved boundaries matter. I raised my glass, warmth blooming in my chest. For once, I wasn't the outsider. I wasn't the difficult daughter. I was part of something bigger, something chosen. Standing at the window later, city lights flickering below, I whispered to myself, I am not their shadow anymore. I am my own light. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. But before I could truly move forward, there was one last step. Closing the chapter with a lesson my family and the world wouldn't forget. 47 hours after David laid those papers on the head table, my father stood in front of a camera, shoulders stiff, voice wooden. The official statement flickered across news sites that evening. I apologized to my daughter, Alexandra Carter, for my behavior at a recent family event. I acknowledge her professional achievements and her right to her own property. This matter is now closed. It wasn't heartfelt, but it was public. And public was enough. My mother never apologized. Instead, she spiraled onto social media, calling me selfish, corrupted by corporate culture, ungrateful. But the internet wasn't buying it. Screenshots of the slap still circulated, side by side with her rants. Most captions read the same. And now we see where the problem started. Lily's honeymoon never happened. Her in-laws postponed it indefinitely, insisting on counseling before any future commitment. For once, her tears didn't sway anyone. But me? My life shifted in ways I hadn't expected. 3 days after the promotion, Forbes called. They wanted to feature me in their 40 under 40. Not for the scandal, but for the deals I had closed, the markets I had opened, the risks I had taken. That paid off. For the first time, my name would stand on its own, no longer attached to Carter, but to Alex. At night, in my penthouse, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows, coffee in hand, watching the city glitter below. It was quiet, finally quiet, and for once the silence didn't suffocate me. It healed me. I realized something then. The family I'd lost wasn't truly lost. They had never been mine to begin with. They loved the idea of control, not the person I really was. But the people who stood by me, my team, my mentor, even strangers on the internet who typed "I see you" in the comments, they were proof that family can be chosen. And here's what I want you to know. Blood doesn't make someone your family. Respect does. Peace without dignity is a lie. Your boundaries matter. Always. If you've ever been told to sacrifice your voice for family harmony, remember this. Silence doesn't keep the peace. It only keeps you small. And you are not small. So here's my challenge to you. Look at your life. Where do you need to say no? Where do you need to draw a line? Because sometimes the most powerful act of love, for yourself, for your future, is refusing to give away what you fought to build. If you believe that, drop a comment right now. Boundaries matter. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that it's okay to choose themselves. And if you want more stories of resilience, self-respect, and chosen family, subscribe and hit that notification bell, because your story matters. Your boundaries matter. And your peace? It is non-negotiable.